Welcome to this Whole Life Action Hour. I'm Ocean Robbins, your host. Thrilled to be here today with our guest, Dr. Christopher Gardner. We're going to be focusing today on nutritional science and what the research actually tells us about how to nourish the human body for optimal well-being. Today's event is a project of Whole Life Club, FRN's ongoing membership community. Some of the questions I'll be bringing to the interview come from our Whole Life Club members. And of course, nothing new here today is medical advice. We're here to share coaching and insights and support you in making the best choices in tandem with your healthcare team for your specific realities and needs. Now, Dr. Christopher Gardner, PhD, as a nutrition scientist and a Renborg Farquhar Professor of Medicine at Stanford. He has for over 3 decades now studied what to consume for optimal health. He served on the U.S. Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee, and he is a former chair of the American Heart Association's Nutrition Committee. He's conducted dozens of human nutrition trials on the effects of diets on cardiometabolic health, including looking at Mediterranean, ketogenic, vegan, low-fat, low-carb, and many other dietary approaches. He's a font of nutritional wisdom, and his work was recently featured in the 2024 Netflix docuseries, You Are What You Eat, a Twin Experiment. Christopher, welcome. So great to be with you.
Pleasure to be here, Ocean. Fun to talk to you, as always.
Yes, your research has explored a wide range of dietary patterns, from low-fat to low-carb, including studies like Diet Fits. What are some of the most surprising findings from that research, especially regarding plant-based diets?
Yeah, I think what surprises a lot of people is how quickly your metabolism changes. So just the most recent study, in fact, was this vegan diet versus staying on a more typical omnivorous diet. There was a 4-week feeding period when everybody was getting food delivered, and then 4 weeks of cooking on your own. So the whole study was 8 weeks. And a criticism that we also often get from people reading our work is, why wasn't it 5 or 10 years? It's like, well, first of all, it's really hard to get people to sign up and say, sure, Professor Gardner, you're curious. I'd be happy to change my diet for you for 5 or 10 years. They're much more likely to sign up for a day or a week or a month or a year. And what we have to do as scientists is figure out, well, at what point is really any kind of benefit or change likely to plateau and not change anymore? At which point it would be great to know if it lasted. But the first step is sort of seeing that. And so if you were to have a stable diet A and switch to a stable diet B, which we do when we have food delivered to their house, it's like, you don't have to go shopping. You don't have to learn to cook these new recipes. Right up front, we're going to deliver it to your house. You can see things like blood cholesterol, blood pressure, insulin, and glucose change and plateau in a couple of weeks. So those benefits can happen quite immediately. And that's been really confirmed and reaffirmed again and again in all of our studies, some of which do go for a year or 6 months. And in those, we always take intermediate measures to see what's going on. And in the intermediate measures, most of the change happens early on.
So we get change quickly when we change our diets. Now, epidemiological studies, by contrast, look at large sectors of population over long periods of time and attempt to analyze what they eat and how they live and then what their long game health outcomes are. Can you share with us kind of the strengths and weaknesses of epidemiological research and how you've chosen to focus your work in contrast to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So in fact, if we could just go back and make it personal, when I first started as a postdoctoral research fellow right here in the same group I'm in 33 years later, I started learning cardiovascular epidemiology. We had a big data set. There were 10,000 people that we had asked a couple times what they're eating. They'd been tracked to see who lived or died. We knew what their cholesterol and blood pressure and other things were. We didn't ask anybody to change their diet. We were just observing what they were eating. And so I would write papers and I was getting published. And it was very exciting to be a young investigator. And at the end of every conclusion, I pretty much had to say, and this dietary exposure seems to be related to this health outcome. And those two are associated, but someone should follow up with a randomized controlled trial to see if it's a cause and effect relationship, because I can only look for associations when we're only observing people. What happens is the people who tend to eat the best tend to exercise the most, smoke the least, and have all kinds of other characteristics that could have been an alternate explanation.
Yeah.
And I'm a little sad of the epidemiology haters, because there's a bunch out there who say, oh my God, you've never proved that. That's only association, not causation. And so can we go to the pro side of this? And the pro side is my longest study was a year. I have some colleagues who have done randomized controlled trials in nutrition for 2 years with food. I know people who have done supplement studies for 5 and 10 years, because then you don't really have to change your behavior. You're just taking a pill or not in the morning, and you can double blind it by giving them a placebo. But if you really wanted somebody to eat more vegetables, more fiber, more fish, less red meat, something like that, it's a behavior change that's hard to get, and it's hard to assess the adherence to that. And when I see that one of my studies has lowered blood pressure or cholesterol or insulin or glucose or something, then I have to say, gosh, and I sure would project that if you did this for another 20 or 30 or 40 years, fewer of you would end up in the hospital. More of you would be leading a more vibrant life. And to back that up, let me show you some observational epidemiology, because these folks took 100,000 people, figured out what they were eating, not necessarily with perfect accuracy, but probably good enough. And they saw the ones that were eating this way instead of this way had less or more of these health outcomes. And I pretty much rely on that. My outcomes that I get funded for and that I study tend to be what we call intermediate outcomes. Blood cholesterol, blood pressure, insulin, and glucose are not clinical outcomes. Those are risk factors that we can measure and try to address. But did you get diabetes? Did you have a heart attack? Did you get cancer or have a stroke? At the end of the day, that's what we're trying to prevent. And this is going to be really selfish, Ocean, but just picture this. Let's say I'm starting as a faculty member and I want to get promoted, and it comes up every 7 years when you're a faculty member. You go from assistant to associate to full professor. If I said, just hang on, just wait like another 30 years till my participants die or not, and then I'll show you this great work that I've done. So I figured out early on that to do randomized controlled trials and publish papers, add to science, and keep my job, the intermediate risk factors were an important part of my career, an important part of building the science. But I greatly, greatly appreciate observational epidemiology for giving that longer term perspective that I never get.
Yeah. Some time back, I heard something, it was reported to be a study, but I haven't been able to back it up. But I'm curious if your intuition aligns with this. It was that the average American thinks their diet is a B minus and that the average American's diet is a C minus. Is it consistent with your experience that most people think they eat better than most people?
True. Yeah. I do think most people think that, without putting everything down in front of them and backing it up, yeah, I do pretty well. That would be a really fun. I mean, I don't have any particular way to grade it, like students in a class with a B minus or a C minus.
Yeah.
But if we were to look at something like the Healthy Eating Index, for example, this is a metric that's been validated and worked on by a number of nutrition folks. It goes from 0 to 100. The average American score, and it hasn't moved much in decades, is 60. 60 out of 100. I mean, if you were doing grades, 60 is a D.
Yeah.
That's like a D minus, not a C minus.
Yep.
And yeah, nobody's really up at 100. So I can imagine them thinking, yeah, I bet if you did mine, I'd be like, an 85. But it's really more like 60. Yeah, I believe that. I haven't seen that study, but now I will look for it also, Ocean.
Okay, thank you. You mentioned how quickly change can happen. And one of the ways I think that shows up is the microbiome, because our microbial milieu can change rapidly based on what we feed those critters. Can you talk a little bit about the impact of fermented foods and fiber on the microbiome and how this influences inflammation, immunity, and overall well-being?
Yeah, I would love to talk about this, and it could be 90 minutes. So you're gonna have to cut, do this thing like cut.
Okay, well, we'll aim for on the short end if we can.
On the short end, I get to work with world-class microbiologists Justin and Erica Sonnenberg at Stanford. They had been doing studies for a decade in mice and all kinds of things, microbiome, and said, wow, it sure is the food that the mice are eating that seems to have the biggest impact. And it mostly seems to be the fiber. And as I was starting to learn more about the microbiome, I kept hearing the terms pre and probiotics. And I quickly learned, oh, it's super simple. Prebiotics are the fibers that we don't digest that go to the colon because we didn't digest and absorb them, and then the microbes get to eat them. Probiotics were the live bacteria that you might get in a fermented food where you're actually eating foods that have live microbes. So we, in one of our initial studies together, we got 18 people to eat a whole lot of fiber and 18 people to eat a whole lot of fermented food. And Ocean, the funny part here was that the Sonnenberg said from all our mouse studies, we are really convinced the fiber is the thing that does it. Fiber, feed your friends with fiber. Think of your microbiome as friends. And if you want to give them some sustenance, eat foods that are fiber rich. And I said, yeah, but doesn't the public really get confused about pre and probiotics? Shouldn't we have one arm for each? They said, yeah, well, that'll be double the work, and we'll kind of humor you if you want. We don't really even want to do the fermented food one based on our mouse studies, but sure, we'll add it. Turned out a couple years later, when we got our paper published in Cell, one of the top science journals, it was the fermented group that did the best. They had been eating kimchi, sauerkraut, yogurt, drinking kefir and kombucha. They increased the microbial diversity that we found in their gut. And we had measured a whole panel of inflammatory markers at the state-of-the-art Stanford Center for Human Immune Function. Center for Immune Function at Stanford. And so this is really great. Increased diversity, lowered inflammation. Looked over at the fiber group and came up with a different but sort of more nuanced explanation. And what happened was, if we took that group of 18 people and split them into thirds, the third that had the lowest microbial diversity to begin with, intermediate and highest, what we found was the group with the lowest microbial diversity, when they started eating a whole lot of fiber, it was like a fire hose of fiber coming down at a gut that wasn't prepared for that much fiber. And it actually had a bit of an inflammatory reaction to that. Whereas the ones who had strong microbial diversity handled the fiber a lot better. And the two canceled each other out. And it looked like nothing happened to the fiber group. So the Sonnenbergs had a really interesting conclusion. And they said, wow, Americans don't really eat a lot of fermented food. We just found that across 18 different people in our study, even though different folks preferred kombucha to yogurt, to kimchi, to sauerkraut, they all kind of benefited in the same way. Their microbial diversity increased in all of them, and their inflammation went down in all of them. So we should promote probiotics, fermented foods, and on the fiber side, it was a little more personalized. Like if you already have a compromised microbiome, which many people with a Western diet do because they haven't been feeding their microbiome, maybe a whole lot of fiber is too much all at once, and you need to space that out over time, take longer to build it up. Maybe eat some more fermented foods to increase your microbial diversity before you throw all that fiber at them. So we continue to pursue this balanced effect of fiber and fermented foods. They're both probably better for your gut and all kinds of gut symptoms that people have.
Yeah.
But we're certainly not at the place today where we could say, oh, Ocean, you have presented with this. You are missing this microbe, and you should eat this kind of wheat. We're not there yet, but until we are, try to get varied fiber in your diet and add some fermented foods.
The probiotic pill industry is about $60 billion in revenues per year. I notice you're conspicuously not even mentioning studying for probiotics pills here when you talk about fermented foods. Are probiotic pills a reasonable source of some of these microbes?
They could be. So we've only done one specific study with them, but you have to understand that, across the different kinds of fermented foods, there are lots of different microbes in those. If you're going to do a study with a probiotic pill, you pretty much just have one strain of bacteria or maybe two or three. And you have to pick from everything that's out there. And so you're quite limited in what you're applying there. it is more specific. So if you found the right set or the right microbe that really helped, you would know it because you did the controlled condition with the pill and the placebo. But really, what's more likely to happen is we'll do a lot of these things with different combinations of microbes, and different people will react differently to them, and we probably won't get a real strong reaction until we know more. So we also did a study with a very specific fiber that didn't work very clearly. And there was all kinds of reason to believe that it would. But if you're having a mixed diet of beans and lentils and peas and veggies and nuts and seeds, you're getting a whole lot of different types of fibers. You're more likely to feed the very different types of microbes in your gut with the fibers that they prefer. So I know that the Sonnenbergs foresee a day in medical practice when you really are diagnosed for sort of the deficiency or absence of a couple important microbes, that we know which fibers actually feed those best, and that we will come up with this personalized nutrition based on a diagnosis and help you right away. We still hope that day is coming, but until that day comes, oh my gosh, Ocean, why not eat just more fiber-rich foods and more fermented foods? Because that hasn't been clearly established yet, and it's hard to show. So it's going to take a while. Those studies are expensive, and there's a lot of iterations you'd have to do to identify those clearly connected microbe fiber pairs.
I was interviewing Dr. Michael Greger recently, and he was saying that in his view, most of the focus on personalized nutrition is largely irrelevant because bad foods are bad for most people, good foods are good for most people, and that's what we need to focus on. He said if you find that because you were told, oh, you should eat a lot of healthy leafy greens, that you eat more, great. But the truth is they're probably good for everybody. And sure, some people are at a higher risk of colorectal cancer and others are at higher risk of some other condition, but healthy food is healthy for just about everyone. Of course, there's variations about allergies and different things, but the general principles really apply. And yet it seems like the focus on personalized nutrition is big business for some folks. And do you think that it's a little overemphasized for what we can actually do for human health right now?
It's certainly overemphasized because most people are getting most things wrong already. And so they're sort of playing around with the periphery. So Ocean, I had the tremendous pleasure and honor of working on an American Heart Association advisory statement about patterns of eating. And so we actually looked at keto, paleo, low fat, vegan, vegetarian, Mediterranean, DASH. We actually had 10 categories. And given how much controversy social influencers seem to suggest there is about nutrition, I was actually stunned at the consensus around 4 key pillars. And then I'll give you 6 that are probably right behind them. And the 4 key pillars are eat more vegetables, eat more whole foods, eat less added sugar, and eat less refined grain. And what's kind of odd is I'm sure those sound obvious to everyone. And it wouldn't really matter if we all know that and we all do it. But if you look, Americans don't eat many vegetables, don't eat many whole foods. They eat a crap ton of added sugar and a whole lot of refined grain. So, oh my God, if people just did those 4 things, I think about half of the nutrition detrimental effects would disappear. And then so those were agreed upon across all the diets from low-fat vegan to keto. And I can't think of anything more polar opposite than low-fat vegan and keto. All the diets agreed on those 4 things. So wasn't that sort of a kumbaya moment? Like, let's celebrate that consensus. But right behind them, I think, are beans and fruits and nuts and eggs and fish and yogurt. So just really quickly, let's do them one by one. Beans. We've got Gundry saying that they're full of lectins that are bad for you, but there's so many good things in beans. Beans, peas, lentils, legumes, there's a whole bunch of names for them. It'd be hard to argue against that. Fruits. Okay, so I know people with diabetes have trouble with sugars, but these are natural sugars in the fruits. Don't drink the juice, have the whole fruit. It's in the food matrix. It gets released slowly. For nuts, yes, they have fat, but it's mostly unsaturated fat, which is different than saturated. For eggs, eggs is probably a little more controversial, but I always think in my nutrition terms of instead of what. And I know a lot of people who eat super sugary American breakfast cereals and bacon and sausage for breakfast. Would eggs be better than those? Yes. Do eggs have cholesterol? Yes, they have cholesterol, but if we had another half an hour, I could explain the metabolism of cholesterol in the eggs.
Yep.
Isn't nearly as bad for you as the saturated fat that usually comes with those. Fish, I personally haven't eaten any fish in 40 years, but again, compared to steak or pork or other things, fish would be a healthier choice. The vegetarians won't eat them because they have a face on them. I agree with that, but compared to some other things, most people would say fish are healthy. And when we get to dairy, that's probably one of the most controversial things out there. And my quick answer to dairy is 3/4 of the world is lactose intolerant, and they do fine without any dairy at all. But among the different types of dairy, including ice cream, milk, cheese, I think the one thing a lot of folks agree on would be yogurt, just plain yogurt, not all the added sugar that you see in the grocery store, plain yogurt, and put your own toppings on it. So if we took those first 4 that I mentioned and these last 6, I don't think there'd be a whole lot of room for personalizing your diet. You would get a lot of calories from those 10 things combined. And if you still wanted to biohack your personal health, I bet you could find some things around the periphery. But until you get rid of all the crap that you eat first and get those foundational things right, I think your opportunity to personalize your diet is very limited because you got to get the main things correct first.
Thank you so much for that. And for those who don't know, we have articles on the Food Revolution Network website about eggs and about yogurts and about plant milks and dairy milk and also about fish. These are nuanced conversations. Of course, compared to what is huge, right? And also to be clear, there are plant yogurts that
Yes.
you can make. We make one with Eden soy unsweetened soy milk that is nice and thick and delicious and probably confers the same benefits and has its own unique, wonderful health profiles without needing to depend on the udder of a cow. So there are lots of options out there. Thank you for all of that. And it's so simple and clear at the end of the day, actually, despite how complicated humans tend to make it. You've collaborated with the Culinary Institute of America to promote healthier eating habits in university settings. What lessons can we take from that work to make healthy and plant-based eating more appealing and more accessible to the masses?
Yeah. Oh, Ocean, that was such a revelation for me. So, I'm pretty proud of my PhD. I'm pretty proud that I can explain the metabolism of cholesterol. But usually when I get into it, people's eyes glaze over and they fall asleep. So, what are your motivations for choosing what you want to eat? Must be your health, because I have a PhD in nutrition and health. I say, no, dude, it's taste and convenience and cost. And maybe health comes after that. Or I know we do have some health warriors who are really all about health, but you just can't get away from the taste side. And a lot of people don't cook for themselves anymore. And there are a lot of industrially processed things that are made to be almost addictively tasty, right?
Yeah.
So I was asked like 12 years ago to help a group started by the Harvard Chan School of Public Health and the Culinary Institute of America to come up with principles of the menus of change. And this is actually 12 nutritional principles and 12 operational principles, because they were trying to help chefs who were getting very frustrated that they got their equipment and they got their menus out, and then the public wanted paleo, and then they wanted gluten-free, and then they wanted vegan, and then they wanted another thing. It's like, oh my God, we're so reactive here. Couldn't we be more proactive? Couldn't we actually get customers, provide health, save the environment, and just get out front of this? I mean, we're the chefs. We're designing the menus. We can go out and make this case and tell other folks, hey, farmers and ranchers, Fisher, this is what we're going to order, because we're the chefs. You might want to be growing and producing what we're going to order. And so of all these 24 principles after these were established, and you can Google this, the 24 principles of the menus of change, very taste-based. The whole idea was lead with taste. We just sort of, you know, fist, palm in the forehead here. Yes, Christopher, make sure you deal with taste. Don't leave taste out of the argument here. And Greg Drescher, who was the head of industry strategic initiatives at the time, coined this phrase that I love, unapologetic deliciousness. Who wouldn't want to eat something that's unapologetically delicious? And I have to tell you how this resonated with me, because I remembered in my younger years finding that maybe this cardboard-like substance had lots of fiber and lowered your cholesterol.
Yeah.
And I could just picture my face scrunching up saying, you know, I know you want to have the cookie or the steak, but this thing is really going to lower your cholesterol. And I'm kind of apologizing ahead of time because I know you like taste and the cardboard isn't tasty. And he looked at me and said, dude, what are you apologizing for? Why don't you come hang out with chefs? Because we can make things unapologetically delicious. And one of the first important concepts they came up with, Ocean, that tied many of the different principles together was the protein flip. And I love this idea. And I want to back it up real quickly to talk about the dessert flip, because the Culinary Institute of America had been challenged at one point by some restaurants saying, wow, people are giving us a really hard time about our desserts and all the calories and all the sugar. Can you help us, do a better job positioning our desserts? And they said, well, how about a dessert flip? You've got a huge slab of cheesecake with a raspberry on top. Why don't you have a bowl of raspberries with a little dollop of cheesecake on top? And you didn't take their cheesecake away. You just flipped the proportions. And then they said, couldn't we do that with protein? Americans seem to love to have this big slab of meat in the middle of their plate. And they've got some starchy potato on the side with butter and sour cream on it. And they've got some limp greens that were overcooked or some overcooked green beans. What if we celebrated the vegetables, the grains, and the beans, and we put them at the center of the plates, this protein flip idea? And if they were going to have some meat, it could be a much smaller portion, like 2 ounces, or it could just be a condiment, or it could be a side dish, or you could leave it off completely and make it a plant-based meal. And so I've been really impressed. For at least 8 or 9 years now, they've really been pushing this protein flip idea and bringing up sort of the cultural fusion of flavors. I mean, if you think of Asians and their tofu, tempeh, soybean dishes, if you think of Mediterranean and chickpeas and hummus, if you think of Latin American and black beans and rice, if you think of Indian culture with dals and lentil dishes, if you think of Ghana, you could do the red. It's a cowpea dish that's very bean-based. There are some amazingly unapologetically delicious meals from around the world that are plant-based. And so if you lead and say, hey, I'm going to blow your taste buds away with how great this is it healthy for me? Oh, yeah, it's healthy. I got that in my back pocket. Is it good for the environment? Oh, yeah, I got that in my back pocket too. Dude, I was much more interested in you being blown away by the taste of this. I thought, these are great. I need to work with these people more. That is such a happier message.
Yes.
And it's still aligned with all the things I'm working on. I'm going to hang out with those guys.
I love it. And there's such a world of pleasure and joy that opens up when we expand our horizons. There are, 10,000 whole plant foods available in the world that humans can eat. If you give up a certain amount of junk foods and processed foods and animal products and you replace them with that 10,000 range and learn how to prepare it well, your world can get so bright and beautiful and delicious at the same time. I love that message. I want to move to a few questions we've gotten from our Whole Life Club members. Lucy said, since I became vegetarian over a year ago, my ferritin dropped. I took all kinds of blood builder supplements and it's still low. Can I improve my ferritin levels without meats?
Yeah, so this is a pretty specific question. So good for this listener. So iron deficiency anemia is quite common in the world. It's one of the biggest nutrition deficiencies. And what's really handy is you actually have multiple metrics. So this ferritin, I'm guessing not a lot of your listeners may know what that is. So ferritin is the storage form of iron in our body, and you can measure that. And as you release the storage form and try to make hemoglobin out of it, it gets put into a molecule called transferrin, and you can know the transport amount of iron that's in your blood. And you can also measure the hemoglobin, and that's what you really need at the end of the day. You need iron in your red blood cells so that you're not anemic. So anemia is the lack of adequate oxygen carrying capacity in your red blood cells, and you'll be tired and fatigued, and life won't go well. So first you measure the hemoglobin. If that's fine, that's good. But if you don't have enough transport or you don't have enough storage, it might mean that deficiency is coming up soon. Good thing you identified that ahead of time. So the first things to do are just go to a Google list. There's a ton of beans that are high in irons. There's a ton of whole grains that are high in iron. And then you have to take the next step after that. After finding the plant foods that are good sources of iron, the next thing is, and this is an extra additional step that you could also look up. I don't want to try to list them all right now. I'm sure I'll miss something. You can increase the absorption efficiency of the iron. So listeners need to know that in truth, the iron that comes in animal foods that basically came in bloody foods is more readily available for reasons that are hard for me to understand. It's called heme iron. Heme, that comes from the word hemoglobin. So when the iron is trapped in a molecule of other different atoms in there, for some reason, even though that's a big sucker, our bodies have the capacity to very efficiently absorb that iron. And when it gets to elemental iron, which we also call non-heme, just the opposite of heme, it's basically just a little iron atom. And those iron atoms have electrochemical charges to them. There's a 2+ and a 3+, and you need to kind of reduce that so it's less reactive. And something as simple as eating vitamin C sources with your iron sources increase the bioavailability of that. If you look at this list, there's other things that you can avoid. You can avoid phytates. I'm pretty sure dairy is another one. Soda is another one. Coffee is another one. There's a whole bunch of things that actually inhibit the absorption of iron. So if you look for the list of things that will help promote the efficiency and the list of things that will inhibit the efficiency, and you pick the best sources, that's your best bet of avoiding meat and getting enough iron in your diet. Just a fun fact, just to list for folks. So if you think of how efficient are you at absorbing different nutrients, I do want to tell you ahead of time that for carbs, proteins, and fats, we're about 90% efficient at absorbing all of that. When it gets to calcium, regardless of what form it is, we only get about 35% of the calcium we eat absorbed, and the rest we just lose as it goes through our GI tract. Iron is almost the worst. So even the heme iron, which is the most bioavailable, only gets absorbed at about a 20% efficiency. And the plant iron is usually only 10% of the efficiency. And if you were to read that and say, oh my God, I've looked at the the RDA, the recommended dietary allowance, and it says I need this much iron. Oh my God, did I need to know that it's only 10% efficient? So I really have to eat 10 times that amount? And that's actually not true. So when the people made the recommendations, they said people aren't going to know what this percent efficiency is. The amount we're recommending takes into account that you really only absorb 10 to 20% of your iron. So you don't have to overthink that. Look at that RDA and shoot for it. Premenopausal women who have a menstrual cycle, they're losing blood monthly. Theirs is higher than men. Postmenopausal women are similar to men. If you're pregnant, you need more because you're growing a fetus in you. There should be lots of sources to help this listener get better at absorbing a higher proportion of her iron for her life stage.
Thank you so much for all of that. And of course, this is not medical advice. We're sharing coaching and best insights.
Nutrition tips.
Nutrition tips, yes. And consult with a qualified healthcare professional for your specific support as appropriate. Yuki said I have, essentially, Yuki saying she's brought down her LDL cholesterol from 234 to 137 with diet and lifestyle. Yay. And she's asking if any studies showing dietary and lifestyle changes also lowering lipoprotein A.
So lipoprotein A came on the scene a while ago. It's a molecule that's really similar to LDL, the low density lipoprotein that carries the bad cholesterol. And it's got this extra little protein on its coat. And so the sad thing for your listener is we haven't really found any dietary approaches to lower LPA. I've done a number of studies where it wasn't my primary outcome, but when it became the cool new kid on the block, the shiny new toy, we would measure it. And we had all kinds of studies that lowered LDL cholesterol, but didn't lower LPA. And I kept analyzing it for a while because I kept thinking, oh, well, maybe there's something else that doesn't lower LDL, but does lower LP(a). And I don't think I can get the funding to do a study specifically on that since I don't have a mechanistic reason to justify that. But I'm hoping, looking at my many different studies, I'll see the LPA dropping in some people. Never really saw the LP(a) move. And so as far as I don't measure it anymore, I'm not interested in it because I was never able to get diet to move it. Doesn't mean you shouldn't stay with your LDL cholesterol, your blood pressure, your weight, your glucose, your insulin. That's probably one that you can't move with diet, or at least not to my knowledge.
Thank you. We had a question from Shadow asking about bone health and magnesium. Shadow is saying that they've been told magnesium is highly necessary mineral in addition to the ones we typically hear about. How do you ensure we get enough in our diet to avoid needing a supplement, or is a supplement beneficial? And do vitamin D, healthy fats, or iron or vitamin C help?
Yeah. And so you will see a lot of calcium supplements that come with vitamin D and with magnesium. If you're going to take a supplement, I don't see any harm in getting the one that has all three. I haven't really seen any studies specifically say, here's the calcium, here's with the D, here's with the magnesium, here's with both of them. Let's wait to see who has a hip fracture or not, because that takes like 20, 30, 40, 50 years to wait till somebody has a hip fracture. I have seen a lot of great things about magnesium. And I have to tell you, Ocean, this is something that excited me a while back because guess what the best sources of magnesium are? It's plant foods. If you look across the spectrum, if you're eating a plant-based diet, magnesium is one of the things that's higher in a plant-based diet. I don't have specific foods to recommend, and I'm not sure it's worth focusing a lot on magnesium-rich plant foods because you might do that so much that you exclude some other nutrients that other plant foods have that you chose to avoid. That would be unfortunate. But if you have some of these fun challenges these days are to try to eat 30 different plants in a week.
Yeah.
You would get a lot of magnesium if you ate 30 different plants in a week, and you'd probably have a lot of fun and it would be tasty and you could mix it up and have some varieties. So I would suggest that listener just revel in their plant-based diet because that is probably already supporting good, solid magnesium intake levels.
Awesome. Thank you. And we do have an article on the Food Revolution website about magnesium as well, if anybody's interested. Jean's asked for a deep dive on foods to eat and avoid to reverse hypothyroidism. Obviously, that's a condition that can have many different causes, but any quick thoughts on foods that could be helpful?
So that is something I have never studied.
Yeah.
So I don't have any input on that. I don't know the special foods. Hey, does your network have an article on that they
well,
could go
believe it or not, if you Google foodrevolution.org and type in hypothyroidism, you will find some great information. And some of the top takeaways I'm going to say are you want to eat iodine-rich foods, not too much iodine, but they are essential for thyroid hormone production. Iodine is really a critical Goldilocks principle nutrient, not too little, not too much. You want to get selenium-rich foods. You want to get enough zinc. You want to get enough anti-inflammatory and antioxidant-rich foods and whole fiber-rich plant foods and enough vitamin D and B12. And you want to avoid highly processed foods and added sugars and excess caffeine. And for some people, gluten. For some people, dairy. For some people, excessive soy for this particular condition. And for some people, excessive cruciferous vegetables, especially raw. So those are the quick tips.
Woo!
Yep. All right.
That just rolled out. That was quite a list. I'm impressed, Ocean. Oh, my God. Okay.
Carol asked about organic produce, nuts, and seeds if available. Is it necessary to buy beans and other legumes organic?
I this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. And I'll tell you why it's the most near and dear to my heart. The main thing about organic is not what it is, but what it isn't. It isn't synthetic fertilizers. It isn't pesticides. It isn't GMO. It isn't a whole bunch of things instead of what it is. And so as you look down the list of things that it isn't, I think the one that's most obvious to a lot of people is the pesticides that go on there. And when you're choosing organic, you're not getting a lot of pesticide residue on your food. There are, I think, over 1,400 different pesticides that are approved for use in the US. And if you're getting organic, there's actually a couple that are. There's sort of more holistic types of pesticides because the farmer has to bring their crop to market and make a living, but most of them are excluded. From what I have seen, Ocean, if you were to take a heart-wrenching or warming topic, it would be kids eating organic versus conventional food. They quite often say, yeah, the kids eating organic, we found less pesticide residue in their blood, which sounds horrible. I haven't really seen the follow-up that those kids died early and horrible death because of the pesticides. And it would be a very hard thing to track because the people who eat conventional food are usually in a different life circumstance than the ones who have the opportunity to eat a lot of organic food. Organic almost always costs more. The one place my mind goes to immediately is the agricultural workers exposed to the pesticides.
Yeah.
We know all kinds of adverse events that happen when there's spills, spray, skin exposure, inhalation. It's really more that you're protecting the workforce.
And the
So here's
people who live in the neighborhoods where those crops are growing.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
where those are sprayed, the planes flying overhead. So I'm fully in support of organic, at least for the workers, if not for having fewer pesticides, soil health, etc. But my worst nightmare in thinking about this option is that somebody went into the produce section where they didn't have organic stuff. And so they said, oh, look, the bell peppers are conventional and the broccoli is conventional and the carrots are conventional. Well, I'm a huge believer in organic. I can't find anything here. I'm going to go into the next aisle. Here's the cookies. Oh my God, here's the organic cookies, and here's the organic brownies, and here's the organic ice cream, and
Yeah.
here's wait a sec. No, you should have had the damn bell pepper and broccoli. And I know it wasn't organic.
Yep.
But this is, again, one of these instead of and with what type situations. What is the trade-off? If you can afford the organic, it's immediately better for the workers. It could be better for you, but it's actually harder to show that in long-term studies to see what those outcomes are. And the quick advice would be my knee-jerk go-to reaction, and we'll see what your reaction is to this, is the Environmental Working Group, which publishes every year the Clean 15 and the Dirty Dozen.
Yep.
And the Dirty Dozen are those crops that are most likely to have a pesticide residue, and the Clean 15 is those least likely. So that if your budget was tight, which is true for many, many people, I'd be less concerned with buying the organic version of the Clean 15. And it's typically something maybe like an avocado that you peel, and you're not eating the skin. You're peeling it away and you're eating the inside. And so it's less likely to have that pesticide residue on it. Whereas something like strawberries often make the Dirty Dozen because of the pesticides used to grow those. So I'm a believer in organic. I personally usually buy organic. I'm really fortunate to have a budget that allows me to buy organic. And I really want to make sure people are eating veggies and fruits and produce that they don't eat enough of already, whether they're organic or conventional.
I completely agree. Thank you. I think that it's important to remember that we have so many studies showing health benefits from eating fruits and vegetables, and most of those fruits and vegetables were not grown organically. So, there's probably upside for personal health. There's certainly upside for farm workers. There's probably upside for the environment, for honeybees, for other pollinators. So there's benefits to going organic if you can, but don't make the perfect the enemy of the good. Enjoy your
Thank you.
veggies and your whole grains and your legumes. Glyphosate contamination is a concern for some, especially with wheat and some oats and some of the legumes nowadays, because they're using it as a desiccant to dry out the crop before harvest, in addition to putting it on GMO crops like corn and soy. So if you're concerned about glyphosate, which is an endocrine disruptor and a probable carcinogen, then going organic on those crops is ideal. But again, do what you can and enjoy your food, and don't get scared of everything, because food should be celebrated and enjoyed, not something to fear. And so we just do the best we can, and a healthy body is more resilient to deal with whatever contaminants it may face. Christopher, such a joy sharing this time with you. I'd love to go on for hours, and thankfully we're in this work together, so we'll be seeing more of each other.
We will.
Thank you for your brilliant wisdom, your incredible studies and research, and the levity and clarity with which you share such profoundly important wisdom with all of us.
And Ocean, you have such great messages. Thank you for all your work and all the resources that you make available to people. Glad to be on the same team.
Thank you. When it comes to cancer, Alzheimer's, diabetes, heart disease, and other chronic illness, what really matters isn't how many books you read, how many webinars you attend, or how much you know. What really matters at the end of the day is what you eat and how you live. The science has given us what we need to know. Now it's time for action. It's time to implement and optimize your healthy lifestyle. It's time to get results. It's time to say goodbye to confusion and hello to clarity. It's time to say goodbye to bad habits and hello to good ones. It's time to fall in love with foods that love you back. It's time to join a community that will support you in achieving your goals. It's time for Whole Life Club.